Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for logging in. Today, we're going to do our best to go over the glitch bill, or what we're calling the glitch bill explained. We do want to give a little disclaimer early on. Please note that what we're discussing here are just items that are being proposed. Nothing has been put into law just yet with regards to House Bill 1395 and Senate Bill 154. What we're trying to do here today is just give you a highlight of what is being discussed right now between the House and the Senate. That way you have a better understanding of what you could potentially expect. However, we have two excellent experts here that will be able to give you some much needed understanding of what is written in these bills. But first, I guess we want to start with some introductions. So I'll start here. To my left, I have Scott. Scott, if you could say a little bit about yourself and the firm you represent.
Sure. I'm Scott Lewis. I'm the president and owner of Building Mavens, which is a firm that focuses on these inspections. We're multidisciplinary. And so we do the reserve studies, we do the assessments for the milestones, and we have MEP in-house as well. I'm a structural engineer by trade, licensed in Florida, and we're currently probably assessing about 50 to 60 buildings right now. So we have a good feel of what has been going on, the inspection process, the municipalities, and the glitch bill and how it may change things a bit. So I'm excited to talk with Rafael and Roberto about these changes that may be coming into place.
Excellent. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you on, Scott. Next up, I have here Robert Blanche with Siegfried Rivera. Robbie, if you want to say a little something about yourself and the firm.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Rafael. And it is a pleasure to be with you and with Scott again, presenting to the listeners. I am a shareholder with a law firm of Siegfried Rivera. I've been with the firm for about 23 years, focusing my practice exclusively on representing condominium associations, homeowner associations, and co-ops on all aspects related to community association legal representation.
Great. Excellent. Robbie, always a pleasure to have you on as well. As for myself, my name is Rafael Aquino. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Affinity Management Services. We're a community association management company. Our core focus is to support community association leaders to accomplish their vision. We do that with 3 simple steps: making sure we align to what your vision is, then executing on that based on our check-ins, and we deliver guaranteed results, one of the only companies in the market doing that right now. But enough about us. I'm sure you want to learn a little bit more about what's going on. So Robbie's going to give us a little bit of an understanding. We have a PowerPoint to at least show and explain how the actual legislation process works, how the sausage is made. I know many of us get confused of how all of this works. So Robbie, if you could give us a little bit of an explanation of how the legislative process works.
Sure, of course. As we've, every time we do one of these legislative update webinars, or in this case, which is a little more complicated, we're presenting on proposed legislation. So this airplane is being built as we're flying it, so to speak, right now. And the listeners, it needs to be said that none of what we're talking about today is a law. Nothing here is yet a law. It is very possible that what we are discussing here will not even make it into law. What we are discussing are bills that have been filed both in the state Senate and in the state House of Representatives, wherein the legislators in each one of those houses have drawn up what they consider to be fixes to the laws that were passed under Senate Bill 4D a few months back, which of course we all know stemmed from or resulted from the Champlain Tower South collapse. And it was the state's reaction to what could be done better to prevent a future catastrophe. So getting to the legislative process, as indicated in the slide that is up on the screen, we present these bills, our representatives, right, our elected officials, our senators and our representatives will present bills within their respective houses. The senators within the Senate, the representatives within the House of Representatives, And those bills are presented during the session, which runs for 60 days. The bills make their way from the time that they are filed. They will have they will undergo various revisions and go through various committees. Within those committees are either killed, or they're amended, or they're approved, and eventually they will be voted upon voted upon on the floor of each respective section or house of the legislature. Both bills in the exact form will have to be approved at each house. And once they are approved, if they're approved before the end of the session, then the governor will have 7 days to act upon the bill, whether he can veto the bill or sign it, or if it's received after the session, the governor's got 14 days to sign that bill. What we are looking at in today's presentation is, and we're calling them the glitch bills. The first one is known as Senate Bill 154, and Senate Bill 154, it finishes in an even number. So, for the listeners, anytime you see a bill that finishes in an even number, that bill was filed in the Senate. Then we've got House Bill 1395, finishing in an odd number. That bill was filed in the House of Representatives. The two bills, when you look at them side by side, are not identical. There are nuances and there are differences in each of the bills. Even though the overall concept is similar, there are nuances between the two bills that through the process, if any of this is going to become law, through the process, there will have to be tweaks and modifications to this at both houses within the legislature. And at some point, there will have to be an identical copy of each within each house, and then they will have to be voted upon within each of those houses before this becomes law. So that's what we're here to be discussing today. Again, we're going through this exercise so that our listeners can get a flavor of what is to come potentially and what our elected officials are doing in an effort to address these glitches. But, again, none of this is yet law. We're keeping an eye on it, and we're going to see if any of this passes and is signed into law, at which point, of course, I'm sure we'll be back here and present to all of you what, in fact, has been approved. But this is kind of like, as Rafael indicated earlier, watching the sausage making process live as we speak.
Thank you for that, Robin. Thank you for the explanation of how things work. As you stated, again, we want to reemphasize that this is not into law, but we will do our best when the time does come to disseminate that information. But one important point that I do want to address is that as citizens, especially living within an association, whether it be condos or HOAs, we do have a large voice. Close to about 9 million people live within a community association in the state of Florida. So if you find any disagreements or if you don't like certain things that you hear, it's an opportunity for you to reach out to them and let them know how you feel, because they do hear most of the times, they do listen to their constituents. But enough on the politics side. Why don't we get into the nitty gritty of it all? So Robbie, I'd like to start with you and start off with, I guess, going over some of the pros and cons and bringing in Scott with regards to Senate Bill 154. So I know one of the things that they mention in there is providing an extension on the deadline for the milestone. What changes are being proposed there from Senate Bill 154?
Yeah, well, the issue with what is being proposed under Senate Bill 154, and again, this pertains to the milestone. We understand that the Senate Bill 4D gave rise to the concept of a milestone inspection and also gave rise to the structural integrity reserve study. So we're first addressing the concept of the milestone inspections, which initially, according to the statute, provided that according to the statute as they are currently worded, it provides that these need to be done for structures that are 3 stories or higher and need to be completed by December 31st of the year in which the property reaches 30 years of age, and then must be completed every 10 years thereafter. We also understood that the existing version of the law provides that a building within 3 miles of a coastline must have the milestone inspection completed by the time that they are 25 years of age. What this legislation now is seeking to do under Senate Bill 154 is first and foremost to provide some discretion to the authority having jurisdiction, right? And maybe a board of county commissioners, maybe the building department, there's going to be a local authority having jurisdiction. And they want to get rid of this concept of 3 miles from the coastline. And so now they're providing that it would be 30 years of age for everyone, except if you are deemed by the authority having jurisdiction to merit the inspection to take place sooner because of conditions like proximity to salt water or other environmental conditions that the authority having jurisdiction determines merit it, then you might be looking at a requirement that would be 25 years of age for your building, as opposed to the 30 years of age. So that is important to notice. It does give some discretion to the authority having jurisdiction as to whether or not you're looking at a 30-year versus a 25-year, and it's no longer black and white as to whether or not you're 3 miles from the coastline, but now it hinges upon discretion, I guess, of the authority having jurisdiction. The provision says that the inspections or the milestone inspections are required under this section if the building's certificate of occupancy was issued on or before July 1st, 1992, then the initial milestone inspection must be performed before December 31st, 2024. However, there are now concepts for discretionary extensions of that time, depending on what the authority having jurisdiction determines, and other findings that may be shown by the individual performing the inspection. I'll turn it over to you, because that might be a better angle for Scott to address.
Yeah, so Scott, I want to bring you definitely into the conversation, because I know one of the big things that, at least from the management side, that we get, a lot of questions, or in some cases, we even get pushback on, hey, we still have time to be able to complete this work. What's your opinion on the overall timing of this, and when should really the association, whether this glitch bill comes into play or not, we already have a solid date of December 31st, 2024. What's your take on when they should get this process started when it comes to the milestone inspection?
Yeah, so the actual law in place right now, which stem from SB 4D, is Statute 553.899, which is for mandatory building inspections, or the milestone. And so one thing that Robbie said, that December 31st, 2024 date was an important date, but also the nuance of the law said, or within 180 days of receiving a notice, right? So December 31st wasn't the end-all date, because you could receive a notice this year if you fall into the category per the law of the land right now. What the proposed Senate bill is saying is that if an association shows, it says, good cause for an extension, which means they're being proactive, and have an engineer already retained, then an extension may be granted, but it still is at the discretion of the jurisdiction. And right now, you can still at this point receive a milestone notice. So time may be different for different associations. It may be different depending on the municipality. And more importantly, if you go to the flavor of the law, it is stressing to have safe buildings and to be proactive. So I wouldn't say to anybody wait because you want to see when you actually receive a notice, because once you receive a notice, you're now on the clock, the real clock with the jurisdiction that governs the building. And there are set timelines you have to follow, which could be also followed by fines if you don't meet these deadlines. And then just from a professional standpoint and the industry, we know how things work. If you decide today you want to hire a professional, it's not as simple as tomorrow you have them, right? You have to go to bid, and then it may take a few weeks to get proposals. Then you have to have a meeting, and then you may wait a month, and then you may have a 2 to 3 month process to find the professional. Then when you say yes, please come inspect, then it may be another month before they come on site. And if you need repairs, that could be months down the road. So some associations that start today may not be seeing results, even construction, till maybe the end of the year. So I think if you're waiting until the last minute, you really are going to be behind the 8 ball at that point, especially if you're thinking December 31st is a date where it could be this year, depending on how old the building is and where you are in the actual state right now. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. It's kind of like making a layered cake. You don't make it all at once. You make it in small pieces. And as an association, dealing from the management side, we're trying our best to educate board members that, now is not the time to kick the can down the road. There's limited amount of engineers, limited amount of contractors, rates continue to go up. So you need to at least get the engineering part resolved immediately so that you can understand where you stand financially, if you need that financial component, that financing component. Not to add on top of that, what the contractors, what costs have been inflation still, your numbers are above 6%. We heard this week. So I have some questions with regards to that. But I want to keep it with you, Scott, here. I mean, one of the things that in the, again, proposed SB 154 language, it states that they're proposing that you could work with a team of professionals acting with the architect and the engineer to conduct the milestone inspection. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's standard practice. When we attack projects right now, you have engineer of record, and they're allowed by the law to direct professionals or staff under their charge. And because at the end of the day, it does rest with that EOR, the liability of the project and so on. So that seems just more of a clarification that it doesn't have to be the individual themselves doing every inspection, but they can direct a team. And there's no issue with that. I think that's what we do nowadays anyway. And that's maybe just giving some more clarity and comfort to that teams can attack these buildings, not just the one licensed individual.
Of course. Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, you have a lot of specialists, whether it be reserve specialists that can work closely with the engineer and also, help on the cost side. Obviously, the cost of an engineer is going to be much more than a cost of someone doing a reserve study or a reserve specialist. So, Robbie, now we spoke a little bit about the milestone that has to do with SB 154. Now we'll still hear on SB 154. Now I want to talk on to, SEERS or Structural Integrity Reserve Study. Regarding the Structural Integrity Reserve Study, we see that they're proposing alternative funding method. What's your understanding of this? And also what changes are being proposed for the waiving of any reserves, or the use of it, I should say?
Sure. Well, the concept within Senate Bill 154 introduces a new defined term. So if this law gets adopted, the new defined term and the definitions within the Condominium Act are included in section 718.103. So the language now provides for 718.103.1, which would be the definition of the term alternative funding method. And as proposed right now by the current legislation, it would mean a method approved by the division for funding the capital expenditures and deferred maintenance obligations for a multi-condominium association, which may reasonably be expected to fully satisfy the association's reserve funding obligations, including but not limited to the allocation of funds in the annual operating budget. So the first thing to note is that the concept of alternative funding methods would apply only to multi-condominium associations. That would be an association that governs more than one condominium. And there's not a lot of those out there. So most of the clients that we tend to deal with, Rafael and Scott and I tend to deal with, are single condominium associations. It's one association that would operate single condominiums. But this is in response to a lot of questions from those out there that are multi-condominium associations, stating that, you know, one association, one condominium may have certain components that another condominium governed by that same association may not have. And so why should all of the owners within the association be required to have the same obligation to fund reserves for all of those other common elements that are not uniform or consistent within every single condominium governed by that association? So they're introducing legislatively, at least it's being proposed, to allow some alternatives to the methods by which the reserves are funded in the budgets of these multi-condominium associations. And so that would allow the division to create or to open the door, let's say, for some of these alternatives.
Correct. And it's important that you mentioned it as you close it. It's really the division, from my understanding, that has to approve that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would, you know, so of course the statute would have to be adopted. That's number one. Number two, we have to be dealing with a multi-condominium association. And then number three, these methods need to be approved or recognized as approved by the division of condominium. So again, as this process continues to take place, we'll keep an eye out for this and see what develops and what whether or not it even makes its way to the legislation that is adopted.
Okay, excellent. So Scott, I want to bring you back. I know we were talking a little bit earlier about cost. So I wanted to see, you know, from the ground, you know, what are you seeing in the market when it comes to construction costs? You know, are they stabilizing, or are we still seeing increases throughout, I guess, all the sides of the construction side?
Yeah, I'm still seeing increases, and I think what's more concerning to me than cost is just the availability right now, because people are getting busy, and even when we want a contractor to come on site for destructive testing or a phase 2, it's taking a week or two to get them even to site, just the cost, right? So the longer you go in a stream of time will become longer. And with demand, it's just the theory of economics. If the demand increases, and the price is going to go up as well. So I think the time is not anybody's friend right now, and I don't see the costs coming down.
Correct. Okay, good point. I have a question here I think we should address here. I'll address this to you from Randall Robbie. He says, as a 2-story condominium complex is not affected by the mandatory inspections by 2024, do they have any obligations after the 40-year inspection and the 10-year reinspection requirement?
So the milestone inspection only applies to condominium buildings that are 3 stories or higher. So if you're a condominium that is not 3 stories or higher, you're not obligated to do the milestone inspection.
Okay. Can I, because it seems from their question to they're either in Broward County or Miami-Dade County. So that mandatory milestone inspection is now integrated into the recertification or building safety programs in these counties. So it's going to outline what the next steps are. But you know, they put there that if there's another 10-year requirement, so they'll be on that stream of time that's explained on the county's website right now. So that's all outlined there.
Excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up, Scott. So one thing I do like as we wrap up SB 154 is one of the things that I do like, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that they are allowing that team, you know, where we could have a reserve specialist, because you do have, you know, many associations that already have the reserve component. And now, you know, working with either a professional engineer to go through that process and allowing it to be more of a visual inspection, I think that there's going to be some benefits. Again, many associations, not all, because there are some associations that have been fully funded and they've always been fully funded. And this is going to be more of a reporting requirement that they have. But many associations are falling into that situation where they just don't have enough reserves. So wherever they can do what's right to the building and to its owners and save some money, there's always a benefit from that side. So we're going to switch gears here now that we're halfway in, talk about House Bill 1395. So Robbie, maybe you could give some glimpse of it, and then we'll kind of go into some more questions of what you see with regards to House Bill 1395, or what's coming down the pipe potentially.
Yeah, so, House Bill 1395, again, kind of keeps the same theme that you see, which is provide a little more flexibility for completing of the inspections. It still keeps the overall, to some extent, deadlines, even though there are subtle modifications, which we will address in the questions to come. But what it does, interestingly enough, do is that it creates some flexibility now, or if it's adopted, would seek to create flexibility to allow people other than, or professionals other than engineers and architects to perform at least some of the services related to the milestone inspection, presumably focusing on the fact that there may be a shortage or some strain upon the engineers and architects to be able to finish these services within the time frames contemplated by the laws created by Senate Bill 4D. There are also some similarities to what you see in Senate Bill 154, such as allowing for the authority having jurisdiction to extend some of the deadlines and some of these other nuances that are introduced in the original glitch bill, which was Senate Bill 154. So it would be interesting now to see whether or not some of what you see in 1395 makes it into 154 or vice versa. Are you going to see 1395 looking more like Senate Bill 154, or are you going to be seeing Senate Bill 154 looking more like House Bill 1395? And that's what, unless you're an insider, we can't really speculate to right now.
Of course. And Scott, one of the things that we did notice in House Bill 1395 is that it allows GCs under Chapter 489 with at least 5 years experience in building and construction and threshold buildings, basically that they could, and also building code inspectors to perform phase 1 of the milestone inspections. What are your thoughts on this, and what happens if it doesn't pass? What happens if, let's say, it doesn't pass the milestone inspection? Is the engineer going to accept what the general contractor and architect did, or will they have to do the work themselves?
So I think, if anything was the most shocking to me of anything I read in the bills, I think this line item was the one that made me jump out of my seat. And so I have many friends that are GCs, and they're going to hate me to say this, but I'll say it anyway. I think this is a terrible idea.
Yeah,
it's essentially, letting the fox guard the hen house, because if they can make repairs, then you're essentially allowing them to go on site and say what needs to be repaired to start, right? And I think could be very self-serving to some. So unless there was some caveat there that said if a GC was going to do the phase 1, they cannot bid on the project.
Yeah.
I think there has to be some nuance there, because it would be almost saying like, you have to hire an engineer first to tell you if the building deserves a milestone. And most engineers will say, yes, the building needs to be inspected, right? It's just not, it's counterintuitive. So I think it's a very bad idea. I know I might get some hate mail. I'm sorry to my friends, but I do not like that at all. I think it kind of dilutes what is trying to be done. On the other hand, I do agree with a certified building inspector. I mean, these individuals have a license and there's certain training, and I think it's a natural thing for them to look at a building and be able to say whether there's the substantial deterioration or not. But like you said, if you have to bring in an engineer for phase 2, more likely than not, that professional will have to reassess things. And so you may be paying, maybe not twice for the first thing, but some overlap of costs, because no engineer is just going to take the baton, so to speak, from another entity, another professional, and just run with it without doing a double check or self-assessment. So I think there is some legs to the law when it comes to other professionals, like a certified building inspector. And again, this maybe a company has these different professionals there. So you can just broaden how many people can look at buildings and who can do a phase 1 versus a phase 2. I think it may not be cost effective to go a la carte, but the GC doing it to start, again, I know this is people are gonna hate me for this, so I'm sorry. That was the one thing when I looked at it, I almost closed the House bill and be like, oh crap, where is this thing going right now? It changes the flavor completely of what's trying to be done.
Of course,
I don't like that part of it at all, and I hope it doesn't get passed.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. That's why I posed that question. I mean, I get the intention of the legislators, right? They don't understand boots in ground. They're dealing from 30,000 foot perspective. So I get that they were trying to provide something to, the way I see it is they were trying to open up capacity, you know, because the argument of there isn't enough engineers. But the challenge that I have with that is exactly why I asked you that question that way is I personally believe that, you know, any engineer that comes in after the fact, they're not just going to sign off and put their license on what someone else said. You know, in my opinion, logically, it makes sense to get the engineer early on, get a good understanding, and that way, you know, most likely you're going to go into phase 2, depending on whether you've maintained your building as you should. So I get the intention, but I'd have to agree with you 100%. I don't think that this is great. So Robbie, I do notice here also in HB 1395 that they make changes to the timelines of the CO of certificate of occupancy trigger with regards to the milestone inspection. Can you talk a little bit about that and what are the changes that they're proposing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that what they've done with regard to milestone inspections in Senate Bill, strike that, in House Bill 1395 is that they now say that a condominium association governed by 718 or a cooperative governed by 719 must have a milestone inspection performed for each building that is 3 stories or more in height by December 31st of the year in which the building reaches 25 years of age. Okay, so that's the House bill. Based upon the date of the certificate of occupancy. It also removes this concept about the 3 miles from the coastline because it basically has now made everybody a 25-year threshold as opposed to a 30-year threshold. But then what they did is they create this concept in effect that if the milestone inspection is required by this bill, and the building's CO was issued during the period between January 1st, 1995 through December 31st, 2000. In other words, if you're kind of like 29 years to 25 years ago, then your compliance deadline is December 31st, 2026 for the milestone inspection. If you got your CO before December 31st, 2024, which is what currently exists right now in the law, then you've got to comply with the, if your CO was issued before December 31st, 1994, then you would have to comply and have your milestone inspection performed before December 31st, 2024. So the established date of December 31st, 2024 remains. It remains in place for the buildings that got their COs before December 31, 1994. If, again, this presupposes that this law gets adopted, if you are a building that got a CO between January 1, 1995 through December 31, 2000, then House Bill 1395 seeks to give you an extra 2 years, in other words, until December 31st, 2026, within which to get your milestone inspection performed. So they've created the stagger deadline for compliance with the milestone inspection, depending on when you got your CO issued.
Yeah, again, I think this is trying to loosen up bandwidth. That's the way I'm taking it. You know, like it's good intention. It's going to be a little bit confusing here and there. But ultimately, I think that's where that's coming from. We'll see what ends up happening. But one important thing that I did want to touch up on is with regards to the timeframes based on, again, House Bill 1395, that they're mentioning that once you have that milestone inspection report, that within 14 days of receiving it, you need to provide a written notice notifying the unit owners that milestone inspection does exist, which, that makes total sense. So hopefully,
it says that, so you're going to get a notice supposedly from the authority having jurisdiction to the association telling you, hey, association, you've got this obligation, you've got to get your milestone inspection done by this such and such date. Once the association gets that, if House Bill 1395 becomes effective, then the association would then be obligated to send notice to all of the unit owners within 14 days from having received that notification, advising the owners of the fact that it is obligated to complete the milestone inspection by whatever the required deadline is.
Excellent. So, Scott, one of the things that they're mentioned here when it comes to the association basically must contract a Florida licensed engineer or architect to perform phase 2 inspection. If the second phase 2 is necessary, within 90 days of receiving that if within 90 days of receiving that phase 1 report, inspection must begin within 90 days of entering the contract with the association. Do you believe that that's enough time?
Again, like time is not what we think. So the phase 2 usually requires another party, which is a GC, right, to help investigate, or maybe somebody else. That's another entity that's doing a moisture survey or some type of scan. So it's hard to put a timeline on starting the inspections. And also, like we said before, if you're a la carting the professionals as you go along, it may be hard to get a cohesive unit doing it. So as I said, if somebody hires me second to do a phase 2, I'm going to have to look at the first report. I'm going to have to do my due diligence to make sure we're heading in the right direction before we start a phase 2. So the timelines there could be achievable, but again, time is the crucial thing in everything right now, because the longer we wait to find out what the nuances may be, it may be hard to get the right professional on site when the time is needed.
Okay. And do you think that it's creative to bring in that structural integrity reserve and that phase 1 together as one?
I think with the right professional, yes, because some professionals are doing both. My firm does both, so it's efficient to do them at the same time, and there's a savings in cost if we do them at the same time. I think the bills would have to work out the nuances of what is included, because right now the structural integrity includes an electrical inspection, right? And so if somebody's doing a milestone, they may not look at the electrical system, and so that may not be a even cover for the inspection. So depending on the professional, depending on the task, you can do both at the same time, and it'll be cost efficient for an association. But I think more explanation has to come out in the bills, clarifying the professionals, clarifying the actual components, and essentially smoothing out the kinks in both products before we can say one inspection covers the other or vice versa.
Okay, excellent point. I know from our side, we've been trying to make that recommendation where possible, just because, if there's any potential, as said many times, potential cost savings, then it makes sense. But yeah, you're right. There is some clarification that's still needed. Especially with the current bill that's talking about foundation and so forth, and how do you reserve for 100% foundation. So,
right.
So Robbie, with regard to, say, an association gets that phase 1, gets that phase 2, it looks like House Bill 1395 is again proposing some timelines of when these reports need to be provided to the unit owners. What's the time frame that they're proposing?
Yeah, so it provides here that within 60 days after receipt of the inspector proposed summary of the milestone inspection report from any phase 1 or phase 2 milestone inspection, then the association must distribute a copy of the inspector prepared summary to each unit owner, regardless of the findings or recommendation in the report. It's got to be sent by U.S. mail or personal delivery, and by email to unit owners who previously consented to receive notice by electronic transmission. So if you don't have owners that consented to electronic transmission notices or to receiving electronic transmission notices, then you don't have to email them. You must also post a copy of the summary in a conspicuous place on the condominium property and within 60 days. And you must also publish the full report, not just a summary, but the full report and the summary on the association's website if you are legally obligated to have a website according to the statute. So 60 days from the time that you get that report, you need to send that out to your constituents, to your unit owners.
Yeah, which that makes sense. I mean, just want pure clarity. At least they looked at our current statute of understanding if people opted in, because it would be much easier just to email it, but obviously not every association has every single unit owner's email. So we get the intention there. One thing that stood out to me, and it's back to you, Robbie, is I noticed that, it's proposing HB 1395 injunctive relief against the association. What does that mean, and what should the association be looking out for? What does that mean for them?
Yeah, so the concept of injunctive relief is introduced in House Bill 1395, and the way it's introduced is to say, what if an association hasn't complied with the obligation to get the milestone inspection or the structural integrity reserve study done according to the statutes or according to these timelines? So what do we do? As an owner, do I have any rights? Does the division have any rights? Do the authorities having jurisdiction have any rights? So House Bill 1395 seeks to create Section 718.13 Florida statutes to provide remedies for unit owners, for the division of condominium, and for the authorities, the local authorities having jurisdiction to enforce these requirements. And it gives them the right to do a couple things. They can file an action in court, in a court that has competent jurisdiction, in which the condominium is located, to seek injunctive relief against the association to do one of a few things. First is to enforce the compliance with the milestone inspection requirements that are required by statute, and the structural integrity reserve study required by statute. And the second thing is to get court relief to prevent irreparable injury to unit owners and the association, and to protect human health, safety, welfare that caused or threatened by a violation of the milestone inspection requirements under Section 553-899 Florida statutes, or the structural integrity reserve study that is required under Section 718.1122G Florida statute. So the same, conceptually, the same remedy would apply to the division. Of course, the division would be limited to getting a court order compelling the association to comply with the obligation to obtain a milestone inspection or an SIRS. And the same thing would apply to the authority having jurisdiction. So it's giving, let's call it, additional ammunition to these affected stakeholders, if we consider the authority having jurisdiction, the division of condominium, and our unit owners to be some of the stakeholders that may be most affected by virtue of an association's failure or inability to comply with these obligations to obtain a milestone inspection or have a structural integrity reserve study performed. I want to mention, because I see a lot of the question being posed by the viewers about the structural integrity reserve study. The statutes require those for buildings that are 3 stories or higher. So if you're a condo that is below 3 stories, you're not obligated to have a structural integrity reserve study pursuant to these statutes.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And, I want to touch up on a couple of the questions that we have here on the Q&A, which Vicky asked, I missed a question about windows. Are they still included in the Senate bill, or we should say proposed, because again, this is all being proposed.
Yeah, that's interesting because House Bill 1395, and I'm just thumbing through it right now, I do not believe excludes windows from the list of components that need to be included within the structural integrity reserve study. However, in Senate Bill 154, there does appear to be a carve out.
Yeah.
And the carve out comes in the following form. It says that this paragraph, and we're talking about the paragraph that requires the condominium associations to obtain structural integrity reserve studies. So if you are required to get a structural integrity reserve study, the Senate Bill 154, if adopted, would carve out certain, building components. And I'm going to read how they do it. They say, this paragraph does not apply to buildings less than 3 stories in height, single family, 2-family, or 3-family dwellings with 3 or fewer habitable stories above ground. Any portion or component of a building that has not been submitted to the condominium form of ownership, right? So that's kind of like, you got a lot of these mixed use buildings.
Yeah.
You've got a condominium that might be in a high rise, but the high rise might include a hotel. It might include offices. It might include retail spaces that are not part of the condominium.
Correct.
So the requirement to get a structural integrity reserve study, if Senate Bill 154 gets approved, would not apply to any portion of a building that has not been submitted to the condominium form of ownership. And this section would not apply to any portion or component of a building that is maintained by a party other than the association. So now, if the windows in your building are not to be maintained by the association, i.e., if they are required to be maintained by a party other than the association, then I'm reading this last sentence to exclude those building components from the list of items included in section G1 of 718.112 2G1, which is that list of things that are supposed to be included in your structural integrity reserve study. While those items remain in the list, the language that I just read would have the impact of removing items from that list if those items are to be maintained by somebody other than the association. So that's how I think they're addressing the issue of the windows and other building components for which the association may not have an obligation to maintain, repair, or replace.
Correct. And I totally, that's one of the things that I really do like of the Senate bill. If it passes, at least that portion is that makes total sense. I mean, a building that has no responsibility with regards to the windows, that would be a significant impact to what they have to save. I mean, from a business standpoint, does it make sense? Possibly, because there's other benefits of insurance and so forth. But at least for being able to comply within the timelines that they have, that makes sense that it should only be an association's responsibility. And as you mentioned, Robbie, because we have managed condo hotels, there are a lot of components in certain associations that will have nothing to do with the association. That's an agreement that the hotel needs to operate. So it wouldn't make sense for them to have to reserve for that as well. So it just goes to show how our industry has so many nuances, or I'm sure many industries, but they're trying their best to be able to address some of these. And you can tell that the unit owners are speaking up because the only reason why these things are coming up is either through different groups that are making their voice heard, or residents themselves doing their part of what needs to be done. Scott, I want to bring you in here on a question that I have from Dan, and he asked, will this bill accept any engineer's evaluation, or must they have some kind of threshold experience?
That's a good question. And just to touch quickly on the windows first. So right now,
Yes.
because we are doing these studies, the practice that we've been doing and other professions I've taught to is just a common area glass. So if it's a high rise and the windows are the unit owner's responsibility, those glazing systems wouldn't be in the structural integrity reserve, just a common area glass. Going to Dan's question, the Florida statute right now allows for the licensed engineer per the Florida statute 471 or an architect to do the inspections. However, there are local jurisdictions that have upped the level of professional that you need to have. So for instance, Miami-Dade County is hedging on what they call a Florida recognized structural engineer, which is a different license that's new, that you have to apply for and have to have different credentials to get, which, you know, in some fashion will create a smaller pool of professionals that can do it. Broward County requires a threshold inspector for threshold buildings, which is 4 stories or more. So now you have, you know, if it's 3 stories to 4, any engineer can do it if they're capable and their credentials allow them to do it. But if it's 4 stories or more in Broward County, it has to be a special inspector, which is a different license, right? And some other municipalities like Highland Beach has the same thing. So it really depends right now what your local jurisdiction is saying. And so you have to really look into that and be familiar with what your governing jurisdiction says before you go to market for what you want, because you may pay for or retain a professional that's not qualified to do it, and their proposal may say they're going to do it per the statute, but the governing law of that area says it has to be a different professional. So that's something that I urge people to look at, especially if you're in Broward County, Miami-Dade County, and Highland Beach are some of the ones I know for sure right now.
Yeah, this goes to really to speak to the importance of working with industry experts, you know, that are in our space. But more importantly, you know, making sure that you have, you know, the Siegfrieds of the world working by your side, if you're a management company or if you're a self-managed community, so that they can put these kinds of things into the agreement to make sure that the person has the proper licenses to do what they need to do. And if they're subbing it out, you know, what are the steps or what protections is the association taking with that subcontractor? So I want to keep it here with you as well, Scott, on another question I have from Annette. That she kind of wants to know. I know you can't go into it all, but what's kind of included in a phase 1 and phase 2 inspection?
Well, the phase 1 is a visual inspection that you're looking at for what the law says is substantial structural deterioration, which isn't cosmetic issues. It's not cracked stucco. It's damage or a deficiency that really affects the integrity of a load-bearing member. And so phase 1 is a visual. It will be, you know, reviewing the perimeter of the building, roof, foundations, going into units, getting an overall sense of what the building looks like. If for some reason the professional doing the inspection says that there's substantial or there's a suspicion of substantial deterioration, that's what triggers a phase 2. So not necessarily will you be a phase 2, because the phase 1 is where it could stop, and your building, especially if it's well maintained, and if you've done repairs on an ongoing basis and have all that documentation, it's simply a check that you guys have no substantial deterioration. However, once you reach the phase 2 level, which is determined by the professional now determines how extensive just how extensive this phase 2 can be. So it could be as simple as just doing some more checks, or it could be opening up areas around the building in different locations. It will be up to the discretion of the professional at that time if your building does have that substantial deterioration there. And that effort is necessary in order to scope what repairs are really needed for the building to get back to good health.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for clarifying that up. And Robbie, I have here a couple questions from different individuals that, you know, I know you mentioned the beginning of the process to vote it in. What's the approximate time frame? And I know that all depends of when it gets passed. But I guess they want to know when they'll know what's actually going to come into law if our governor signs anything. What is somewhat of a deadline they could be looking at?
Well, I mean, most of these get the session will end 60 days. So I would say by the end of April, we should be having a better idea of what is going on. And then we will see if the governor will either sign it. And again, this could be signed, you know, if they fast track it. It could be done even sooner.
Correct.
But I don't suspect that that will be the case. I suspect it'll probably be done later on in the session, maybe closer to the end of the session. And it's not surprising that a lot of these things get there's a blitz usually right at the end of the session to get a lot of these bills approved. So I would say let's keep in touch between now and the end of April, and we'll keep our constituents and our clients all informed as to what's going on.
Okay, excellent. So we do have some more questions here, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time to keep it within an hour. So I'll go over a couple more. I have a question here, and I know this question comes up a lot, is will condo associations now be required to maintain full reserves versus partial? And I think, Robbie, this question is probably more of some people's interpretation of fully funded means that they have to have everything within that reserve study by X date, by December 31st, 2024. I think some people interpretation is slightly different. What are your thoughts, I guess, based on today's, where we are today, and maybe in comparison, if there's any changes in the House bill or the Senate bill?
Sure. Yeah. You know, the way it's written right now, let's forget for a moment about Senate Bill 154 and House Bill 1395. The way it's written right now, the associations have the right. Well, there's two buckets, right? When we're talking about reserves, we're talking about what have been known as traditional reserves that we've always been required to have. And then as a result of Senate Bill 4D, we created this hyperset or this superset of reserves, which are the ones we call the SIRS, the SIRS reserves, the structural integrity reserves. And those are the ones that are included in that subparagraph G. You know, roof, load-bearing walls or other primary structural members, floors, foundation, fireproofing, fire protection systems, plumbing, electrical systems, waterproofing, exterior painting, windows, and then like this other catch-all provision. So those items, once after December 31st, 2024, after December 31st, 2024, we will never be able to have, unless the law changes, we will never be able to have a vote of the members to partially fund those reserves or to waive those reserves. Nor will you ever be able to get a vote of the members to use those reserves for any other purpose. Okay, that's why we're calling them the super reserves, the untouchables, right? Then you've got the rest of the traditional reserves, right? Whatever was traditional minus the super untouchable reserves. That leftover group of reserves, the traditional reserves, you could still waive. You could still partially fund. Okay, at least that's how I read the statute.
Yeah.
So that's how it is currently written right now. Now, the reality is, when you look at your total reserve accounting, once you take into account how much are you reserving for the super reserves, for the SIRS reserves, what really is left monetarily as far as like what are you contributing toward on a year-to-year basis for reserves, it might not be that much. You know, that the number may not be that huge. And of course, all of this depends on your building, on what building components you have, and on what your consultants that create the reserve accounting and recommendations for you might conclude. But that may be a case-by-case decision as to whether you may even want to waive or partially fund those reserves at that point, given that the SIRS reserves will not be allowed to be partially funded or waived.
Right. And you know, I agree. It's just the time frame is what's obviously driving everyone nuts. But you're completely right. When you look at the components that are included right now in today's law, it's going to be a majority of what you should be putting away for reserves. So we'll see what happens. Right now, as we see it, there's not much changes when it comes to that. So it's important that, you know, you're taking those steps to communicate with your residents, letting them know, whether it be via town hall meetings, whether it be through email, whether it be through traditional snail mail, just letting them know of what's to come, especially if you don't have reserve. So want to touch on one more question and then we'll wrap up here. So I want to close it with you here, Scott. We have here Michelle. She's asking, she lives in Boca. They have a building that's going through a 30-year inspection. Do you believe that they will need to repeat the milestone?
So no, if you go to the Boca's website, City of Boca, and read what it says, again, these municipalities that already have these building safety programs in place are essentially saying the structural safety inspection that's mandated suffices Florida statute inspection. So they should be able to use that structural safety inspection to serve as their milestone. And that's what I'm seeing right now for building programs that are already in established areas.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Well, we do have more questions here, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So any questions that didn't get responded, feel free to reach out to us and we'll direct you, whether it be myself, Robbie, or Scott, and we'll be able to assist you or at least point you in the right direction to try to get you those answers. So wanted to close with any closing remarks. I guess I'll start with you since I started with Scott, Robbie, at the beginning. If you have any closing remarks for our listeners. Before you get started, we do have here, if you want to track the Senate bill or the House, go ahead and you can use these links. If you don't have this information, I'm sure Stephanie from the Siegfried team will send it over to you. But here we have the links available for you. And I'll include the contact information for each of us as we do our closing remarks. Go ahead, Robbie.
Thank you, Rafael. I want to just, close by saying that we are in interesting times as it pertains to condominium and co-op associations since the advent of the laws passed during the legislative session when Senate Bill 4D was adopted. This continues to be a changing landscape. It's a changing landscape for the better. It's a changing landscape to provide safer buildings, more accountability for the board members, the managers, and the professionals that have a touch on those who live and reside and own condominium and cooperative units within the state of Florida. So, we may not always get it right. Maybe not at the first time, but I think with regard to what the legislature is doing, I think that the first bite at the apple was a good one. I think that that was with regard to Senate Bill 4D, and what they're doing now is trying to fine tune what was the result of that, and you see that the spirit of that in what is being proposed in Senate Bills 154 and House Bill 1395. I encourage our viewers to keep up to date with the legislative process. The links that you provided earlier are instrumental in that, and they can follow them and even provide for alerts, I believe, on changes that might arise. And so that is very important. And if there are any viewers that have an issue with what is being proposed in any of these bills, reach out to your elected officials. They are responsive. They do want to know what your thoughts as constituents are with regard to these bills. And it is important to be part of the process. I want to thank Scott again for his insight, and you, Rafael, for the opportunity to be here in order to share some of our views and our thoughts with regard to this material, and appreciate that you continue to partner with us on these presentations.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Robbie. Scott?
Yeah, so I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, Roberto, for the discussion. And I think for the viewers, one of the major things that I get for why people are delaying is because they're waiting on the glitch bill. And they're saying, well, this may do this and this may do that. But the law is already in place for milestones. The law is in place for structural integrity reserve studies. From what we're seeing from the glitch bills, they're not changing these things in a way that is that material that will stop our association from doing what needs to be done. The state has made it known that it's of paramount importance, the structural safety and welfare of the building. So time is not on anybody's side right now. If you delay to get this done, it will only come back to you. If repairs need to be done, time is not on the side for the building. So I don't think any association should delay to get a professional in to at least give them some direction. So if they have questions, get the questions answered from the professionals, and that way they can navigate this in the best way possible. So if that's anything I could leave with everybody, is just let's not wait anymore. Let's get to action, so that way you don't end up in a crunch at the end of time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Scott. For me, first, I do want to thank you both. It's always an honor to be alongside each of you. You know, the wealth of knowledge, and even what I learned through the Senate bill being even and House bill being odd. You always learn something new on these webinars. I do want to thank the team behind the scenes that made this happen. Stephanie and her team there at Siegfried, helping put this together, and Lewis from my team. But ultimately, I guess to piggyback on what Robbie and Scott mentioned, we do need to act now. As Scott said, I think you said it very well. Now is the time, if you haven't acted yet. As you could see within the 2 proposals that we have thus far, there aren't any major changes, as Scott mentioned, that are going to allow you to say, okay, well, I got another year to wait. There really isn't much change for most associations. So you need to act now. But like everything else, you know, I tell the board members that we deal with, or accounts that we're interviewing, you know, it's going to be a rough next couple of years. But the reality is that, you know, this pain is going to allow you to get the gain in the future. And because you're going to have the money now in the accounts to do what needs to be done. Now you can no longer just say it's dealing with neighbors of, oh, I don't want to pay more. No, this is law. We need to guide ourselves by these principles that were provided to us. So in a couple of years, you know, the conversations should be a little bit easier, just because these associations will have the funds to make the right decision. But ultimately, I understand that it's a big lift for many associations right now. But from what you've heard today, it's so important to work with individuals that are experts in their field, whether it be Affinity, whether it be Building Mavens or Siegfried Rivera. Whoever you decide to work with, just make sure you're working with professionals that know the sector and can point you in the right direction. Lastly, I want to applaud you all for being here, both managers and board members. It says a lot to your leadership and what you're looking to do, the good deeds that you're looking to do for either your clients or for your residents. So you do deserve an applause as well. So thank you so much. We will have another webinar fairly soon where we'll either go into a next update or give you the final go around of what occurred and what was approved. In the meantime, don't hesitate to contact any of us. Thank you, gentlemen, and have a great day.